Hello everyone, I wanted to talk about how Star Wars canon worked before Disney, or before Disney bought Star Wars, and in the days when the expanded universe was still canon. So essentially, they had different tiers. There was G canon. It's a little bit misleading. G stands for George. Now, it's misleading because it's not everything George Lucas created or had involvement with. It was just the 6 movies. That's it. Despite the fact, George Lucas's involvement within the EU and the fact and Star Wars: The Clone Wars, and the fact that he wrote a few EU things. So it was just the movies. That's it. There was also T-Canon, which stood for television. But television, or T-Canon, was really just Dave Filoni's Clone Wars. It wasn't the Ewok TV specials. It wasn't the Droids and Ewok cartoons. It wasn't the Clone Wars microseries by Jenny Tartakovsky. It was just Dave Filoni's Clone Wars and nothing else, which is a little strange. You think they'd put that other stuff in T-Canon as well. The next level was C-Canon, or continuity canon, which was all the books and most of the comics, but not all of them. Oh, but Iron Inquisitor, what about the video games? I'll get to that in a second. So yeah, C-Canon was pretty much the majority of Star Wars. It was pretty much, yeah, most of the expanded universe. And now we get to S-Canon. S-Canon is a little bit strange. S-Canon consisted of older Star Wars material, like the Marvel comics, and some of the older Star Wars EU material produced before Thrawn trilogy. So stuff that was at the time not really meant to be canon, but was later brought into canon. Stuff that could have happened, or stuff that did happen, but not exactly in the way that the story exactly depicted it. This is also where Star Wars video games come into play, because you can have multiple endings, multiple ways to play the game, multiple ways to customize the character each time you play. Like, in a lot of these Star Wars games, every time you play, it's a slightly different experience. So how did it really happen? And like I said, also, there's certain things like that would only work as video game mechanics. Like, in Star Wars Jedi Starfighter, you're using force powers in flight, which wouldn't really work in universe. Or like health meters, stuff like that is just video game mechanics. And so for those of you who think Starkiller aka Galen Merrick from The Force Unleashed, is overpowered, well, guess what? Gameplay footage is not canon. It's S-Canon. Just because you see Starkiller do something super powerful looking in the game, it's not canon. The events of The Force Unleashed did take place, but not how the gameplay footage depicted it. So there's all to you people who think Starkiller's some overpowered Force god. Alright, so now we get to N-Canon. N-Canon was the only thing in Star Wars that has always been non-canon. the Star Wars, those, you know, those middle school graphic novel things like Diary of a Wimpy Kid? There's a Star Wars version of that. That's end canon. Or a lot of the Star Wars Tales comics, which were Star Wars Infinities. In fact, all of Star Wars Infinities was end canon. So Skippy the Jedi Droid was never part of the expanded universe. It was never canon. So yeah, it was the only thing, the only officially recognized level of canon that was not canon whatsoever. There's a few other unofficial levels of canon that never were recognized or never got implemented, such as decanon. And no, that does not stand for Disney canon, for those of you who are wondering. It stood for Detours canon. Before Disney bought Star Wars, they were working on an adult-oriented Star Wars comedy cartoon. I was kind of inspired by like Robot Chicken and Family Guy, stuff like that. But of course, because you know we're Disney, we need to be family friendly, they canceled the show. There was also F canon, which was fanon, which was stuff created, which was unlicensed Star Wars material created by the fans, such as fan films, fan fiction. And of course, like I said, D canon and F canon were not used by Lucasfilm. D canon was going to be, but it never got used. Alright, so that's how they did canon. Now let me get one thing straight. G canon, T canon, C canon, and S canon were not separate from one another. They were not separate entities. I'll cover this in another video. A lot of people like to use the hierarchy of canon to try to prove the EU wasn't canon, but I'll do a video talking about miscellaneous things people try to say to prove the EU was quote-unquote never canon, and I'll debunk them. But I'll just say now that they weren't separate from each other. All those levels of canon were part of one continuity and one universe. It wasn't like Dragon Ball, where you had this, some of the television series weren't part of canon, so they were separate. No. G canon, C canon, T canon, and S canon were all one thing. All were canon. They really were one homogeneous conglomerate. But again, like I said, I'll cover that topic in another video. So that's the hierarchy of canon. I wanted to do this video for those of you who are, new to the expanded universe and, don't really know how things worked. So, have a good day, people, and hope you enjoyed the video.